And our adventure continues. We woke up in Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument after spending the night under the stars off Last Chance Creek Trail near Grosvenor Arch. Grosvenor Arch is actually a double arch surrounded by some pretty cool scenery that's actually oddly devoid of any other serious rock formations. After another camp breakfast of steak and eggs, we packed up and headed to Grosvenor Arch one last time for a couple of photos and to use the vault toilets before the next off-roading leg. With one last glance at the amazing double arch, we continued on Last Chance Creek Trail down to Cottonwood Canyon Road, where we turned left to head deeper into the middle of nowhere. Cottonwood Canyon Road is relatively flat at first, coming from the northwest, but then the terrain keeps changing. We soon reached an area of rock road covered in a thin layer of mud and loose silt, where the road got pretty narrow in some spots. Soon, the landscape changed again. The muddy vegetated light browns, tans, and tree greens changed to a landscape suddenly filled with white, red, and brown rock outcroppings, green, white, and brown dirt, and sparser tree outcroppings. The trail also started to get a lot more hilly, with long dips into valleys followed by long muddy climbs out. This made for some spectacular scenery, though. Near some of the more impressive rock outcroppings is the beginning of a nice hiking trail. If you're in the area and have the time, you'll love the views at this spot. After a bunch more miles, the landscape changed again. The rock outcroppings now look like hills from being worn down by the elements. The rock road was covered by rock sand and dirt, and the trees were replaced with sparse shrub growths. Eventually, we reached a long and windy switchback and started making our way to the top of the butte. Behind my ascent, you can get an idea of how long these switchbacks were. You can also see how the landscape had become a lot more desolate. We passed another rancher and a bunch more cows and headed onwards. Wanting some more serious off-roading, we made a detour onto Trail 7015 to head the rest of the way up the plateau through a bunch of steep and sharp switchbacks. Each time around a turn, you can get an idea of how steep the switchbacks really are from how far down the Forester and Baja are. Way down in the distant background, you can see the valley we drove up from, and besides the power lines, for miles you can see nothing but nature. These switchbacks were a lot of fun, but not really that challenging. Eventually, we neared the top of the butte and started to hit some rock outcroppings. Though you can't really tell in the video, some of the outcroppings we drove over were a foot or more tall. You can see my ascent kicking up dust as it clawed over them on 2 and 3 wheels. Watching the Baja tackle the same terrain, you get an idea of just how steep it was and just how high some of the rock outcroppings really were. Finally, at the top, we found trees everywhere. Besides the trees, you can also tell that cattle were grazing up there. We also found a bunch more rock shelves in the road. Nothing too serious, but when you watch my scent drive over them, remember that I have over 12 inches of ground clearance. Even with that ground clearance, I scraped my skid plates in a few places. The rock shelves in the trail got a bit more serious. Even with my improved breakover angle, you can see where I had to take some of them at an angle to not get stuck on top of them. From there, it was time for a bunch of loose rock and tall rock shelves in the middle of the trail, making the drivable area pretty narrow. These rocks jutting out of the trail can do some serious damage to the underside of a car. While Ryan filmed them, Haley chased after the Forester with one of the cameras to get some cool footage, while Zach deftly made a slow crawl over the loose rock. And finally, other Rob bounced his way over the obstacles in his Baja. We had a few more rock sand-covered hills to carefully slide down. Once again, some careful driving was required, so we didn't high center our middles on the rock shelves sticking out of the trail. We slowly wound our way across the butte and over some more rock steps that helped ensure we had a bumpy ride. After many more miles, we made our way to the switchbacks that would take us down into the next valley. The landscape once again quickly changed to one that was empty and desolate. The video sadly doesn't do them justice, but these were probably the second most dangerous switchbacks of the trip. As they're on the turns, you can see that they're actually very steep, and in some places barely wide enough for the ascent. On top of that, the trail is actually made of rock that's covered in rock sand and dirt, meaning we had to take it slow all the way to the bottom to avoid sliding off the cliffs. In the distance, you can see the valley that we're heading into next. These switchbacks weren't nearly as challenging as Kelly Grade, but they were an interesting exercise in patience. Here's another great view showing how steep they really are. Finally, we made it to the bottom and into the valley where we could pick up the pace, at least a little bit. Once at the bottom, we made a turn onto Trail 7010 for some scenic washes and fun obstacles. There were a number of places where the washes intersected the trail, but even more interesting was that there were a number of places where the wash became the trail. For those of you who don't know, even though the skies are blue, the washes in this area can still be very dangerous. All it takes is one storm upstream for the mostly dry wash to become a torrential river. Besides the water dangers of the instant river, the river also kicks up literally tons of mud. In many places, the mud is made up of dry, powdered clay, meaning if you get stuck in it, it's very difficult to be extricated from it once the rains and the water stop. keeping an eye on the weather upstream, we made our way down the trail to head to our next adventure spot. As other Rob and I made our way around, Zach and the Forester made his way down a bunch of narrow rock steps worn into a crevice by water. You can see just how tight the opening is as Zach makes his way down. Ahead of me, you can see the tire tracks of someone who took this little hill too fast and headed right into the rock wall. That will give you an idea of how deceptive these hills are. They're not very technical, but they do take driving with care and knowing what you're doing. As I make my way down, you can see the ascent's tire sliding even though I have my foot on the brakes. Now it's my turn to tread the crevasse with my much bigger ascent. One of the things I really love about off-roading descent is that it takes a very light touch on the steering wheel, as you can see. Taking the correct approach path was only a teeny part of the fun little challenge. Knowing how much my ascent would slide left and right was equally as important, especially since it was simultaneously sliding downwards. Making use of my front camera, my side helper mirrors, and 2 more sets of eyes from Ryan and Zach, I made it through with inches to spare on both sides. The view from above shows just how tight the crevasse was for the ascent. Next, other Rob made his way down in the much narrower Baja, with about as much slipping and sliding as I had in my ascent. We tackled a few more rock shelves and boulders jutting out of the landscape and continued to make our way through the washes towards yet another landscape soon to come. Suddenly, everything opened up to wide open, empty fields for as far as the eye could see. We ran into a large empty wash with a pretty sharp transition at the bottom. Crouching in the bottom of the wash, Ryan got some great shots of each of us making our way through. Each of us ended up shoveling dirt with both bumpers. The ascent, being the longest, shoveled the most dirt. If you watch closely, you can also see exactly when I unclipped my front bumper on the dirt. Those of you who off-road Subaru's a lot are pretty familiar with that, I'm pretty sure. Once the Baja made it through, we realized that we finally had a calm spell without any serious winds, so we decided to chase the cars with the drones. This also got us some great views of the landscape as we made our way through it with the drones. One more turnoff back onto Trail 7000, Cottonwood Canyon Road, and the road became pretty well maintained again. We bid our final farewell to Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument and headed on. After a few more miles on Cottonwood Canyon Road, we had finished another 70 miles of off-roading as we made our way back to paved roads. Up next, the next epic part of our journey, camping and fun in the Sand Hollow State Park.